Russia is a big, cold country. For hundreds of years, it was ruled by leaders called Tsars, but in 1917 there was a big revolution and the Tsars got kicked out. Why did this happen? For a really long time, Tsars held basically all of the power, which made Russia an autocracy. There were also aristocrats who owned lots of land and had some power, and the common people who worked for the aristocrats were called serfs. They had no power, like at all, which made them pretty upset. They also weren't allowed to move locations or basically have any political rights. Hey, Russian government, can we maybe—
No,
said the Russian government, for like 200 or 300 years. But eventually, in 1861, Tsar Alexander II said, "I got you, I'm ending serfdom. Now, you're free to move locations and stuff."
Wow,
Said the peasants, excitedly.
wow.
Said the middle class, somewhat less excitedly. Wait, you're thinking, when did the middle class show up? Well, basically right now. Western Europe had a middle class for like 200 years by this point, and Russia is finally modernizing, which means Russia gets one too. But the Western European middle class had all sorts of dope things like money and representation in government and social modernization. The Russian middle class doesn't. So they asked, can Russia be more like Western Europe? I just freed the serfs and I'm making all sorts of reforms for the country. Can you guys chill for like 2 seconds? I'm doing a great job. And he was kind of right. The great reforms that Alexander launched were pretty good for the country. They addressed some of the most basic problems, like fixing the courts and improving healthcare. But they didn't really address the whole political representation issue. He did add a local government program, but it didn't have much real power. But that's okay, alright? Think about all the other previous czars who didn't do this stuff. I mean, you're right, but this still kind of sucks. We should have
a constitutional monarchy.
What? Said Alexander. A constitutional monarchy is where the king is still king, but there's a constitution as well, and he has to follow it and stuff. Said Alexander II, so I would still be king. Yes, said the rest of the country, but we'd also have a constitution to protect our rights if you're being a terrible Tsar. There was a long pause while Alex thought about this. That's just so radical. How about this? I'll add a group of advisors, and we can slowly move in the direction of a constitutional Oh. That boom was a bomb going off, killing Alexander II, right when he was about to sign the thing to make the thing better. Who would do that? That's right.
Radical, violent, revolutionary socialists.
Get used to these guys, they're basically half the story. As it turns out, a while back, a German guy by the name of Karl Marx wrote this pamphlet called The Communist Manifesto, which advocated for, well, communism. But Russia is an autocracy. Clearly there's a problem here. At this point, people in Russia haven't gotten wind of Marx yet and are sort of just winging socialism on their own. But it won't be that way forever. We'll revisit this later. Alexander III takes over after his dad is blown up. Unsurprisingly, he doesn't want to sign the thing his dad was about to sign. Why would I give the people this power? They just blew up my dad. And he goes on a massive campaign of restoring the autocracy in every way possible, which makes a lot of people angry. He also pushes Russification and persecutes the Jews because it's good for the country to have someone to hate. So his reign is going pretty poorly, and then it gets
Way worse.
In 1891, the weather sucks, like a lot of the time, and there's a massive famine as a result. The economy crashes, and people blame the government because it's kind of the government's fault. To make matters worse, there's a big cholera outbreak too, and so lots of people get terrible diarrhea. Hundreds of thousands of people die. The only good thing Alexander III does is set up an alliance with France, which will actually be a huge pain in the ass in, let's see, like 20 years when it helped start World War I. Fortunately, he dies of kidney failure, paving the way for our final Tsar, Nicholas II.
Wait, what do you mean final Tsar?
What? No one said that.
Yes, you did. Literally just now.
Nicholas gets the throne in 1894 and follows in his dad's footsteps of being a jerk for most of his career. The people still want political reform, and he still doesn't want to give them any. This is Vladimir Lenin. He hates the government because they killed his brother. Granted, his brother tried to assassinate Alexander III and probably deserved it, but hey. Young Vladimir spends a lot of his time joining anti-government groups and reading political literature, like the Communist Manifesto. It had some new ideas about how to govern. Some radical new ideas. Take it away, Carl. What exactly is your pamphlet about?
I'm glad you asked. This is all about how society is in conflict under capitalism. The bourgeoisie keep getting richer and the proletariat keep getting poorer, but it doesn't have to be like that forever. During industrialization, people go to cities to find jobs. The jobs in the cities are factory jobs, but the factories are owned by private individuals, and those private individuals will abuse the poor workers who have no other choice but to work for low wages. But if the workers unite together and overthrow the bourgeoisie, then the system will no longer be rigged against them. The workers now own the factories, and production will be for the common good rather than the profit of the few. Now, you have communism.
Right. Okay, well, there's a crash course in Marxist philosophy. Young Vlad reads this stuff and thinks it sounds pretty good. Certainly way better than the Tsarist system. Unfortunately, he gets arrested multiple times for various reasons and eventually gets sent to Siberia in 1897. But during his exile, Vladimir reads a lot more radical literature, and he evolves into his final form, an actual socialist leader ready to combat the Tsarist regime, which is currently trying to figure out how to get Russian people excited about being Russian when their lives are so So as the Tsar, how do you get the people on your side? That's right, a war! But with who? Japan is doing some stuff over here, and Russia also wants to be doing stuff over here. Problem? The Japanese attack a harbor, and it's kind of a big deal because Russia only has like 2 harbors, so
Nick declares war.
minor problem, the army is all the way over here. Good thing Russia literally just finished the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So all the troops get on the train and drive out to eastern nowhere, but they only have 1 track, so it's gonna take a while. Realizing they will also need the Navy over there to defend the harbor, Nick sends the Russian Navy right through the Suez Canal.
No.
What?
You can't do that. That's our canal, and we say no.
So, Nick sends the Russian Navy right around the entire continent of Africa, and it eventually gets there. So there's some fighting, and everyone expects Russia to be the winner because Russia is quote-unquote Western power, and Japan is, well, Asian, and everyone is racist at this point in history. But the unthinkable happens. Russia loses. Or, to be more accurate, Russia is in the process of losing, and Nick is determined to fight tooth and nail until they win, but his ministers and friends and stuff are like, Nick, stop it, let's just sign a peace treaty, this war is bankrupting our entire country, and our infrastructure sucks, and who really gives a about that part of the country anyway? Nicholas II, after some thought, decides that maybe everyone is right and he should give up. They sign a treaty and begin the long process of having all the soldiers come back to civilization. Now that we got that out of the way, let's recap how Russia stands in the world theater at this point. Industrial power? Pretty good. Growing steadily as more and more people move to cities trying to improve their lives. Farming? Worst among the great powers. The people moving to the cities are now no longer farming, but Russia exports grain to pay for the new factories it's opening, so food shortages are common, which in turn leads to social unrest. Throw an inefficient government and the fact that most of the soldiers are still somewhere in Siberia at the moment, and we have the perfect cocktail to create revolution. Shaken.
With fear of a populist uprising, that is.
And this fear of a populist uprising is manifested in a great event that we now call Bloody Sunday. Setting, St. Petersburg. Urban workers take to the streets to tell Nick II, hey, we are kind of unhappy and will you please meet with us to talk things out? Luckily, Nick is very reasonable. He listens carefully and responds with, how do these bullets taste? Okay, technically it wasn't his decision, but at the end of the day, the peaceful protesting becomes decidedly less peaceful when the soldiers just start randomly shooting people. Hundreds die. A bunch more get really upset, and they start to realize they don't really like the Tsar. People go on strikes to show how unhappy they are. We're unhappy. We want political representation, and we're not going to do our stuff until you give us some. And the workers don't come into work the next day, or the day after that, or the day after that, until Nick gives up and says, fine, you can have political representation. Here, I made this Duma. It's the answer to all of your problems. And he also lets them make a constitution-ish thing called the October Manifesto, which provides political liberties and stuff. Now, will you please go back to work? Okay, said the people, slowly. But on closer inspection, it turns out this new Duma thing is pretty useless. It was supposed to be a legislative body similar to a European Parliament or American Congress that had some oversight to check the power of the Tsar from doing whatever the hell he wanted. But, since Nick wasn't too keen on this idea, he put a bunch of loopholes in so that he could still remain in absolute power while convincing people they had political rights. It doesn't really work at all. The first 2 Dumas go way off course because the people in it want a bunch of reform, and there are so many of them that they might actually vote the reform into law. Guys, that is not how this is supposed to work. Nick gets to work trying to figure out how to fix this. Let's revisit our friend Lenin. Shortly after getting out of Siberia in 1900, Lenin kinda sorta created a new socialist party, the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks are more radical than a lot of other socialists, which makes things complicated from a rally everyone together to fight the Tsar's government standpoint. That brings us back to Bloody Sunday in 1905 and the creation of the Dumas and all that stuff. The problems with the Tsar's government are too large to ignore, and people are starting to think about alternatives. Socialism among the options. Follow me, poor people of Russia. I will lead you to a brighter future.
No, that's all wrong. Did you even read my pamphlet? The people are supposed to rise up themselves when the time is right. If there's a leader figure, it ruins the whole point of a popular working class revolution.
I'm hearing what you're saying. I should become the new autocrat, to help them help themselves.
What? No.
Good thinking. In theory, Lenin is breaking the rules, but he's trying to be realistic. He thinks that if they wait around for the exact perfect conditions Marx wrote about, they're going to be waiting a really long time. So he decides that he'll adapt Marxism into a more Lenin version of Marxism. Leninism. Meanwhile, Nicholas II is still trying to figure out how to control the Duma. Using his Tsar power, he redistributes the representation and puts in a bunch of people that agree with him, called the Octoberists. The Third Duma starts in 1907 and runs for 5 years, but it doesn't do anything to solve the massive unrest in Russia. Things deteriorate. It's now 1912 and time for the 4th and final Duma. Yeah, they said that about me earlier too. What are you talking about? Nothing. This 4th Duma also does what Nicholas wants, and things are going peachy when... That's right, World War I is breaking out all over the world, and Nicholas feels Russia should definitely get in on the action, partially thanks to that alliance with France his dad made. Unfortunately, Russian enthusiasm for World War I lasts like 2 weeks. Nearly every facet of the war effort sucks. The railroad sucks, the army sucks, the generals really suck, and when everything is at its worst, Nick decides that the only reason they are losing is because he isn't in charge. So he decides to abandon the political unrest at home and go off to lead the army. Back in the Duma, the Octoberists start arguing among themselves, leaving a power vacuum. Most of the Duma members join this group called the Progressive Bloc, whose goal is to salvage the war operation from Nixon competence. Now there's even some socialists in it.
Including radical Bolsheviks.
Wait, so the Tsar isn't here anymore? Nope, he's out fighting somewhere in Eastern Europe.
Revolution!
By 1917, things are so bad that people just straight up revolt. In February, they call it the February Revolution. It starts with pissed off women who just want bread, but things spiral out of control and the whole city gets involved. We can't take it anymore, they say. We want a new government. Wow, this sounds like a perfect time for Lenin to make a move. Except that he's in Switzerland currently, i.e. not in St. Petersburg, and in no position to lead a socialist revolution. So the people have a normal revolution and the military joins them and it's a really big deal. I give up. What do you mean you give up? I'm done being Tsar. This sucks. No one likes me. I'm tired of it. Wait, really? What happens now? This has never really happened before. Without a Tsar, the people make a provisional government to keep the country from going to while they figure out step 2. A bunch of confusing stuff happens with various groups fighting for control, and eventually Lenin and his Bolshevik party win. They have another revolution in October, cleverly called the October Revolution, and then fight a civil war for control of the country. Blam! Now the Soviet Union exists.